Okay, okay, so this will be the second video where I'm going to talk a little bit more, um, or kind of talk out loud. It's kind of like a thinking process for me. Um, so it's probably going to sound like rambling, so just kind of bear with it. But I'll try to share as much as I can on, again, like how I would approach this, and I hope this helps. Okay, um, so I wanted to cover load orders first because I know that's whenever a person needs help or something goes wrong, that's the first thing you'll see is, do you have a mod in there? Well, that's the problem. Goodbye. You got too many mods in there. How many plugins you got? Too many. Goodbye. Um, and that's what I'm trying to help with. So that's why I wanted to talk about that first. So let's take a look at your crash log. I could now the auto one. I know what the auto one does. It basically looks at data in the regular crash log and then tries to summarize it. I'm not really interested in this, but what I am interested in is the crash log itself. Okay, and I'm gonna show you why. So first of all, let's take a look at the crash. An unhandled exception. It's an access violation. Okay, so I know that unhandled exception means that the code does not take into consideration that a condition could exist that it was not designed to handle. In other words, the error isn't trapped. So that's what caused it to exit out. You can trap errors. That's what I was like. For example, I'm going to show you some code here. And I like, I don't know, I definitely don't know C# or C++. This is easy for everybody to understand because it's very verbose. So, and this will be very easy for anyone to modify. But what I want to show you here is, let's see, do I have it here in this? Let's try this. I do not. All right, let's go over here. I know I have one here. This is exception code, right? Let's see, it's, all right, let's try this, catch. Here we go. Okay, so just typing the wrong stuff. All right, so basically, let me show you what trapping does. So in this code, I have a try statement, but don't worry so much about the actual syntax. Just basically, I'm saying from here down to here. Okay, so kind of forget about all this stuff for here. Anything that happens between this right here, try, and catch, it's basically going to encapsulate that little bit of code, this code right here. It's going to encapsulate this code right here, so that if for some reason something causes a crash or an error, it's not going to exit the program. It's going to catch it, and it's going to do whatever I want it to do in the catch, which here I'm basically saying, throw up a message. Let me see, throw up a message, which the message goes over here, like this stuff right here. Let's see if I can show you an error message real quick just so you can see. And that's what it does. Yeah, I don't have one per se, but when you see it, it'll give a lot more information about what caused the error. Okay. So if you don't trap the error, this is what you get. You will get an unhandled exception. You'll get an unhandled exception. Okay. Now, the way that, okay, so now let's talk about DLLs, and then I'm gonna swing back by this for a second. So this right here is a library of functions. Okay. So to help put it in context, let's go over here and take a look at this particular library. Okay, or let's take a look at the networking library, for example. Okay, I believe it's I think I got a function called start server here. Okay, so, and I'm refactoring all this stuff. So basically, here's a library that has a function in it to start a server. So it will take as input all the information it needs to do what I want it to do. And what's nice about what they call API, or an application interface, or a DLL, which has different functions as it, is you don't have to write this code all over again. Because what programmers used to have to do is every time somebody wrote a game, they had their own proprietary like their own proprietary functions for drawing and doing all these different things. So they'd have to reinvent the wheel. Programmers call it reinventing the wheel. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. If somebody else has invented the wheel, you don't want to reinvent it. You want to use what they did. And that's one of the things Microsoft did, is to strengthen the viability of its operating system. They provided you all these wheels that you can use. Graphic interfaces, things like that. It's like DirectX allows you, it provides you a bunch of 2D, 3D drawing routines that you don't have to write your own. You just, provide the data, call the function, that points to your 3D data, and then it renders it. So, and that's pretty much what that does. So, these particular libraries don't have a lot of error checking in it because they need to be as tight, as small, and as fast as possible. So it's very small footprint memory-wise. It can execute as quickly as possible. So they don't have a ton of error checking. That is what the higher level applications should do. So in this case, it didn't. Like I say, in game engines, they're pretty tight. If it's very, very time critical, it's time critical code. So to keep your frame rates at a certain level. So you can't put a lot of code in there. So some things you're not going to be able to handle, and it's going to cause a crash. And that's what happened here. An access violation means that it probably was a bad reference pointer. It probably tried to reference like a reference of 0, 0, like 0. Like I talked about, like I've kind of posted something about that earlier. So usually this is a bad reference or bad pointer because it tried to point to data, a location in memory that it shouldn't have, or it was protected memory, or it just was something that was deleted. But look, here's this. See this right here? This was the DLL that caused the issue. Now, I didn't memory map this or anything, but we're just kind of showing you. So let's say, well, okay, so we got a lot of variables. So let's take a look at that DLL. Let's go over to, let's see, here we go. Sorry, I was listening to some music. All right, so let's go over here and let's take a look at this. So here is this DLL, right? So this DLL right here. Oops, that must be like an image or something. Okay, so what that DLL does, it provides all of these functions. And there's a lot of them. Like, there is a lot. Okay, so this is part of Microsoft's distributable, which means that programmers don't have to write all of this code if they need it. It's already provided by another company or a third party, such as, let's say, Unreal Engine. When people use Unreal, they provide all this stuff. So instead of writing these functions themselves, they use Microsoft's version of it, right? So that is what this is. So the game engine, call a game engine or a DLL, something that's hooked into Fallout 4, called a function from the distributable. It's like called a function from from the Microsoft distributable. That's like they call it a C++ redistributable. But what I'm interested in, so that's what we know how that is. We know what an unhandled exception is. We see its exception violation, which is probably a bad pointer, and this is a data structure, something that's pointing bad. And then we see that this is just simply a DLL that provides many different things, and this will tell you which function failed. Although I didn't map that out. Okay, so now let's take a look at the stack. Stacks are usually in what they call LIFO. It's last in, first out, LIFO. You have FIFO, which is first in, first out, which is like what you would do with a customer service queue. First person into the queue is going to be the first person out. Stacks are LIFO. So I'm assuming this is the top part is the last entry, and then way down here is the first entry. Because notice, if you start going backwards, let's start at the stack. You have, here's the call. This was the last call that was made when it crashed. I believe it was called from, it was called from Fallout 4, the executable, and that is the address of the instruction that made the call to this function call. And notice where it says nav mesh, because this is going to come up a lot. And then, of course, you can see where Fallout 4 made the call, but what I want to do is I want to go backwards. So we're going backwards down the stack. And you can see, as you go backwards down the stack, All right, you have, let's keep going backward. Now we're getting down to the operating system. See, you have kernel base, and then you have NTDLL. This is getting down to the operating system. Okay, so this is what your stack would look like. Okay, so this is from the oldest to the newest. We're at the oldest, or this is the first in. Remember, but we're LIFO. So what happened is you run the game, the operating system comes up and says, okay, you want me to execute code? I'm gonna get it going here, and off it goes. And then you can see once it fires in Fallout 4, kernel base makes some calls, and then it's doing its thing. So it looks like if you see, so that kind of explains the stack. So the last thing on the stack before the crash was up here, because as different things call different things, it kind of stacks up, and then it's like, okay, I finished that. Let's start. Finish that. Finish that. Finish that. Let's go back to what called it. So you can see this was the last thing on the stack, and I'm gonna assume this is gonna match the top one. So let's go up and take a look at the top. Not quite. So this was the entry point. So when it called this was probably the entry point, memory mapped entry point into this function, and that floats depending on the application. So, all right, and you can see this is the address point inside the entry point where it crashed. Okay, so I notice it says navmesh, and if you keep going down here, you're going to see navmesh pop up a lot. Navmesh, navmesh. Okay, so the next question would be, if I was looking at this, let's say I was looking at it for myself, I would say, what was I doing? When this crashed, what was I doing? Was I in a settlement? Was I fast traveling to a non-settlement? Was I fast traveling to a settlement? Was I approaching a settlement? Was I approaching a non-settlement? Or was I just standing there doing nothing for 15 minutes and down it went? So if you are approaching a settlement, fast traveling, or loading a game into a settlement, like you're loading a game, you happen to be in a settlement, it's loading a cell. It's always going to have to load a cell. It's going to have to load that cell data. So to do that, like I said, it has to generate what's called a nav mesh. It's a navigational mesh, and it's just a very, very simple way to quickly determine where a character NPC can move, because a lot of the 3D math is complicated, and if you multiply that by 100 NPCs trying to calculate where they can move, they'll either get to where your whole game bogs down, your frame rate drops down to like 1 frame a second, or it's impossible to move that many characters in a given amount of time, so they just wind up standing around. Like, once Bethesda game gets to like, well, not necessarily Bethesda game, but once any game gets to a certain number of NPCs, it doesn't know what to do. Now, you can balance this. You can go in and say, okay, I've got too many characters, so let me give them something to do. Let me create a priority. It's an AI priority. So I've got 100 characters. I can only deal with 50. Can I assign 50 characters something? Make some go sit down. Make some look like they're eating. To take that time slice and then give it to another NPC who's standing there doing nothing. That is one possibility. But okay, so back to our time. Let's take a look at nav meshes. So we got nav mesh, you got collision filters, object reference, and it looks like DLL coast. So I'm assuming that either this was loading up from the game, or somehow, for some reason, this was in DLC coast, some reference. I'm not sure if you were in Far Harbor or not. But to me, it looks like that it was either generating a nav mesh or trying to calculate. I don't see here pathing. So, oh, my stomach's gonna growl again. I don't see here pathing. It's definitely persistent, isn't it? I don't see pathing in here. So it's not like it was trying to calculate a path for an NPC. So I don't know if it was generating a nav mesh. This could be a broken nav mesh. It's hard to tell at this point, or a missing nav mesh. I'm not sure. But you can see the form ID, and you can see the form type. So here's one thing you can try. You can go into your game, if it doesn't crash, type in PR, like go to the console, type in PRID, and then in PRID put PRID, like 4 letters together, space, FF0619B2, hit enter and see what comes up. See if that tells you what the object is. It'll tell you where it came from. Because if you have better console, I think it's better console. Um, I don't have the game up, but it'll show you more information. In fact, let me bring it up real quick while we're talking, and I'll see if I can show you what that is. Okay, so I'm gonna fire this off. Um, oh yeah, I added more mods. Oh my god, I added what was it? Oh man, I can take a look at the manifest here in a second. What the heck was it? I added something that puts buildable. Oh, it was books. It's collectible books. I find it neat to kind of like when I'm running around, find different books and collectibles. To me, that kind of would tell me a little bit about the culture and history of a people. Um, even though like if I was a human, if I was a human being in the Fallout 4 universe, actual, that was like real, then I would be part of that culture per se. But because I'm kind of not in a Fallout 4 universe, a virtual universe, so it kind of gives me an idea of that culture and tells me something about the people. So I love things like that. Okay, so like I say, it's this is Reshade having to compile, more than likely compile way too many shader references. So this takes an incredible amount of time to do, but then it will come up, and I will load into the game and show you what I'm talking about. We can actually go over here, I think, and see what come on, you can do this. Go game, go. Alright, let's go in here and load this game up. And hopefully she doesn't crash. I can't guarantee it. Uh, because a lot of my crashes happen when I'm first loading a game into a settlement. And I think I believe it has to do with the fact that it's triggering events, and a bunch of stuff is building lists based on what objects are supposed to be loaded, and some script is not done yet, removing or placing objects that now is in a list. So I just don't think maybe some of the code doesn't edit it to see if it exists. It doesn't wrap it in an edit like, is this a valid object reference, before I try to use it as a reference for something, and then it'll crash out. So hopefully this will work. Okay. All right. So what I'm referring to is, like, for example, you would go. What am I doing? I'm moving too quick here. Okay. So you type in PRID, and then whatever your value is. So the value would be this right here. So let's see. 2468. That is 8 bytes. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. I don't want to go there. Let's go here. All right, so let's do a V. Oh, what am I doing here? There we go. So we do a V. All right, and see, of course, it's not in my game, but if it was here, you should actually see something like this. So let's say this was the object here. I can click on this. It would show something like this, right? And this happens when you bring up the control key, hit control key, and it tells you more information about it. But down here, it'll show the last base change. And it would say where does it come from? The base ID is here. Where does it come from? This is the location. And then the last time it was changed, in case it was modded by something, in case a mod changed that record. So these are the things you want to look at as far as that's concerned. Okay, so let's go back over to here. All right. So here you can see this. This was the last thing that saw, because remember it's LIFO. Every time something's called, it goes up the stack. So this is what caused the crash. So this meant that some data was passed to this function that is bad. It either it needed a data reference and it was 0, or the data was removed or deleted and it was still in a list or something. So this is what I would try to do to isolate what this is, to see if you can actually do a PRID over here and then put it in and see what you get. See if anything comes up, to see what your base ID is, and that will tell you which mod the nav mesh or whatever it was came from. Now that doesn't necessarily guarantee that's the error, but it might tell you more about what potentially could cause the problem. I'm going to guess that it has to do with either a broken nav mesh or and if it's an intermittent problem, the broken, like if you have a broken nav mesh and an NPC tries to, because a nav mesh is kind of like a series, like if you're going to the creation kit, and I've seen this, so a lot of like I haven't really like done it a whole lot, so I can't tell you the quirks of it, but you'll actually define a rectangle, and that rectangle's a nav mesh, and then you'll connect another rectangle to it. So these rectangles are connected, so it becomes one polygon in a sense, or a linked list of connected rectangles. If that gets broken and an NPC tries to move, one nav mesh is going to point to it's going to have a bad reference. So instead of going to the next nav mesh, it's broken. Most MPs will stop. They'll literally just stop. They're like, well, I can't find another nav mesh. I can't find the next nav mesh section, so I'm just going to stand there. And you'll see that when your companion can't follow you places. It's a broken nav mesh. It doesn't affect you, but it affects them. So it's possible in some conditions where NPCs will actually be on a broken nav mesh and then try to navigate off, and it will break. It'll crash the game. It's broken and it will crash the game. So that would be my first guess, that somehow it was in trying to generate a nav mesh, or it's a broken nav mesh somewhere. Now the question is, where did it come from? Try to see if you can locate, again with this PRD, see if that points you to the right location. If not, we'll take a look at, we'll see if we can try to find a way to isolate what it might be. I don't want this to go on too long because I know it can kind of be, and it's not like, don't worry about like breakfast or anything. I'm cool with that. I got, like I said, I got some coffee, hot chocolate. I don't know what person would call that other than like a poor man's Starbucks, but and see if that helps you at least get started, or helps kind of, help you debug some of that and see what it is you're looking at. And I'll see what else I can maybe think of here. And yeah, we'll figure this out. Okay, so we're still here, so hang in there.